Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Autism Stories. I'm your host, Doug Bletcher, the founder of Autism Personal Coach. Autistic people are the true experts of the autistic experience, and Autism Stories is where we interview autistic people to learn from their stories, experiences, and get their insights. If you would like to be notified about each week's episode of Autism Stories, we suggest you subscribe on your favorite podcast listening platform. We would also appreciate it if you could give us a positive rating and review, as it will help others to learn about autism stories. On today's episode, Dr. Julius Johnson-Weaver joins us to discuss gender-affirming care and organizations whose actions match their words. We hope you enjoy today's conversation. Dr. Weaver, thanks so much for joining me here on Autism Stories.
Great. Thank you for having me.
I wanted to start off by learning about where does your story in the autistic community begin?
Well, it starts in so many places, but I think initially, I think that it started even in childhood. I didn't necessarily have the words for it then, but as I look back, I realized that my entire family really is neurodivergent, whether there's ADHD or autism or other things. And I think when you're raised in a family like that, everything seems pretty normal. Like in the sense of like, everything seems pretty typical. Like, oh yeah, this is how we do things. This person's got a little bit of the sensitivity here and there. So we didn't definitely use those labels then. That's really where it began. And then I think as I moved through as a physician, I've been a clinician for 20 years. I hold multiple identities that are classically discriminated against. So Black, I'm a trans person. I lived life for decades as a woman. I am a trans man, and neurodivergent. I have ADD and I'm self-identified autistic. So having all of those sort of multiple identities, I typically attract a patient population with a lot of multiple marginalized or identities that are typically discriminated against. And so even though I might not have articulated then with some patients too, I'm very sensitive to different things and I'm very affirming to different things. And so over the years, I just feel like this has just been part of my life. But more recently, it's been something that I could put a name to. My child was diagnosed with autism, and she's a high-achieving individual. And people who would be typically sort of underrepresented or misdiagnosed. And as we went through the entire process, everything was 1,000% me as well, which is typically how adults are diagnosed. It's usually they're bringing in their child and they're like, oh, this is me too. And that's why I self-identify as being autistic.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things is when we learn as adults we're autistic, it really helps. Well, obviously it helps us to understand ourselves, but at least, from my perspective, it really helps to understand my family members, whether they identify as neurodivergent or not.
Absolutely. It really does. And I think, when I was growing up, we were in survival mode often. We were Black, larger family with coming from very humble beginnings. And because of that, we were often in survival mode, meeting racism often, meeting some financial challenges. And you don't have a lot of time to look at. We were moving more as a collective as opposed to sort of individual identities. And you don't have time to do a whole lot of that work with self-awareness. But definitely now looking at it, it makes me understand a lot of things.
Now, you mentioned you're a doctor, you're a family medicine doctor who's been practicing for 20 years and are the founder of RMD Proud Gender Affirming Care. What would be some ways you think that doctors can do a better job of providing gender affirming care that I consider to be life-saving care?
Oh, absolutely. That question is a great one. And so I have been practicing for many years in big organizations, but started Resolve MD Primary Care 6 years ago. And then RMD Proud, which is an arm of the primary care program that really focuses on gender affirming care. As you said, this is care which I tell people is akin to treating blood pressure and diabetes. You wouldn't let a diabetic walk around without their diabetes medicines. They would have problems and eventually die. Same with high blood pressure, lead to stroke and heart attack. Gender affirming care saves lives. It allows people to align with their gender identity if they are born opposite of that. And providing that care prevents people from going on to have, higher rates of anxiety, depression, suicidality, and suicide, successful acts. And so we are saving lives when we treat people the way they are asking to be treated, and when we believe people. The problem is the medical institutions right now, and even definitely when I was going through it, don't really have extensive training in gender affirming care. And every physician should have it, whether you're actually going to prescribe anything or not. You should be trained in this way so that you know how to take care of transgender and gender diverse people in an affirming manner. Because when we don't, it's harmful. It's harmful for other marginalized groups like Black people to meet doctors who are biased. It is harmful for a transgender person to meet a doctor who has their own bias, who does not affirm their chosen name, who does not affirm their pronouns, who has no imagery around the office that says this is a welcoming space, and that does not use gender neutral language. So that's the starting point that I tell people, is really learn about some of the issues that transgender and gender diverse people will face in the healthcare system. Remember that their name may not match their legal name, and that's something called chosen name, and it really needs to be used consistently. You need to train all staff from front office to back office to people who clean the rooms. Make sure you're using the right name, the right pronouns, and you have to remember your language needs to be gender neutral at best around the office, and that allows for some, affirming environment, the start of an affirming environment.
Now, I'd imagine there are many things about RMD Proud that makes your practice unique, but I wanted to ask you about your primary care membership model, because I've not seen that too often. Can you tell our listeners about this model and how this model's been helpful compared to the traditional insurance model that I don't think works very effectively?
Sure. I mean, there's lots of issues in our healthcare system, and there's people constantly working to try to understand where we can kind of make things better. And so I practice, as I said, I practiced in large institutions for most of my, practicing years as a clinician. But 6 years ago, I started Resolve MD Direct Primary Care. And direct primary care practices are practices that provide primary care, but without using insurance. People pay a monthly membership fee. So there's no additional fees. You're paying that monthly fee for the visits you get with your doctor. And RMD Proud does the same thing. People who would like just gender affirming hormone care and other resources through me would pay a monthly fee. I did it to fill a gap. So one is, have you ever tried to get to your doctor and the doctor says, well, I don't have an appointment for you for a couple of weeks? Have you tried to call your doctor in the middle of the night? And of course, it's after hours, you're going to get the on-call system. You might get your doctor, but you might not get your doctor's partner, or one of 10 doctors in the practice, or 15 doctors in the practice. That's not a problem. Doctors off regular hours can cover for each other. But often, sometimes what may happen is if that doctor doesn't know you as well, there may be some things that you could have, you treated a little more easily if it was the doctor that did know you. Also, besides not being able to get in with the doctor, where people often complain about having visits that are too rushed. They had to break the visits up, or they felt like the doctor was, a little preoccupied because they were trying to get to the next room. And listen, I'm not criticizing my own physician community. The strains that we have are very high. We have high patient populations, patient numbers, but direct primary care slows things down. Instead of taking care of a patient panel of thousands, we take care of hundreds. And that allows us to have higher accessibility. You call your doctor, you're going to get in with them very quickly. You're going to call your doctor, and your doctor's actually going to call you back in a timely manner. You call after hours. I'm not taking calls every single day, 365 days of the year, but I take the majority of my patient calls after hours. I don't get a lot of them, but at least when someone does call, they know it's the doc that knows them well. So the foundation is really a very, very personal type of care where we're really strengthening that doctor-patient relationship and giving people the time they need to get through the issues that they want to get through. And I love this model, and I'm happy to bring it to the gender affirming care arm of my primary care practice as well.
I'm wondering about your patients who may be considering top surgery. Uh, I would imagine you certainly can talk to them about this from the medical perspective. However, I'm also thinking about the impact of your lived experience of also you've went through top surgery yourself. How would you say the combination of your medical knowledge and lived experience has impacted your patients in those situations and discussions?
Oh, well, it's actually quite wonderful. You know, gender affirming care, because of my own lived experience as a trans person, is also one of my special interests. And as I mentioned, I wasn't trained in this through medical school. So as it becomes part of me in terms of my own lived experience and awareness of it, I want to know more about it. So I'm delving into it, not only from wanting to practice this type of care and offering it to my patients, but of course, learning for myself. And there's something to be said when both are there. A doctor may say, if you've had surgery, go home, you're going to recover in 4 weeks. But not having had that surgery themselves, sometimes they don't quite get some of the nuances of the things that you're going to go through. And I have, in most respects, I have a lot of those little nuances. So when I talk to people about top surgery, of course, we're all asking, who's your support system? You're going to go have surgery. You're not going to be able to lift your arms over your head for weeks. You're going to be groggy the first few days. You're on pain medicine, and you're not going to be moving around a lot. Of course, most doctors are going to say, hey, make sure you have a support system and all of that. But taking it a step further and being in the trans community, some people don't have a support system. Like, you're trans, often you're ostracized from, you're disconnected maybe from community and family. And I've talked to some people who are trying to go through having top surgery alone. And I think, wow, what a tough and vulnerable experience. So I think we delve more into who's going to support you after this, even though I'm not the surgeon who's performing it. I definitely want to know, what's set up around you. Myself, navigating the healthcare system to get top surgery, even as a physician, was challenging. Meeting discrimination with doctors who just don't understand why you're even doing what you're doing is not a good feeling at all. And so I understand that, having lived that experience, when I'm talking to my patients and knowing they're navigating the same processes of getting it scheduled, finding the right surgeon, having it done, and then building a supportive community around you. They're going to get some of that from their therapist and maybe their community members, but they're also going to get that care and understanding and the nuances of having a surgery like that from their physician.
I love talking about community. So whenever one of our guests, I see they say something about community, I want to ask them about it. And I read where you said that our great Black visionaries often have said we were not meant to liberate ourselves without community. How have you gone about in finding and developing community that's been helpful to you in your process of liberation?
Right. Community is essential. Even for people who are, for me, I'm very much an introvert. I don't need to have a large number of friends. I have a very strong family that I look to, but they don't have experience in being trans. So it's just essential. You need to see yourself, because it affirms you and it keeps you going in the tough times when you are met with the world telling you that you shouldn't exist. We've got laws coming out of Florida telling trans kids they can't even transition, or their parents are going to be taken away from them, or their teachers are going to be fired for supporting them. And so, yes, community is essential for Black visionaries, and other great people in the past and present say the same thing. I am a bit of a Facebook guru in the sense of finding support groups. I have support groups for almost any identity that I have in various ways, as well as my interests. I have support groups all over the place. And there's times when I'm looking through some of those support groups every day, and other times where it's like, this is the point in my life, it's just not a priority, and I'm not. But I used Facebook was probably the first. And there are just a ton of transgender support groups, transgender men and women, transgender non-binary. There's trans men over 40. There's just a ton. And so I tell people, first, an online community is easy. You don't have to engage. You can kind of just be someone that reads posts and go back through the history of it and affirm yourself, especially for folks who don't, again, are an introvert, if you're autistic, things that just make your social communication a little bit more challenging. And then I tell people go through, your local organizations. I do think there's something to be said about in person and sort of going through online sources like Meetup or your local organizations like PFLAG and finding community. So those are all the ways that I have. And so I have a nice balance of many Facebook groups, some Instagram people I follow. I love to watch people transition. It's affirming to me. And there's so many Instagram pages where people talk about that, and TikTok, and it's wonderful. And then I have some in-person meetups, and that's helpful because in those, I feel like I can build stronger relationships and you get connected to even more resources. So sometimes I have to push myself a go. Again, the introvert in me would prefer, not to, but it is essential. And I don't think I have as loud of a voice and be as great of an advocate for trans people if I didn't actually have those support groups.
Now, in thinking about community, you had a video where you talked about how Planet Fitness has an inclusive slogan. The slogan is "You belong," but they don't have any gender-neutral bathrooms. So I think it's a fair question based on that fact that they may think only certain people belong there. Have there been any businesses or allies you've experienced that their words actually were backed by their actions to support those that are transgender?
Absolutely. And it's wonderful because to ask that, because exactly what you said, it's you have this slogan, but then you're not backing up with action. And it's so important. I think Planet Fitness is thinking you belong. They're probably thinking about different body types and different people in their transition, their journey of transformation within, becoming more healthy or being in the gym. So they're probably thinking different body types. Like, don't feel, bad if you don't come here in your big muscles or you're really in shape. If you're a woman and classically the gym might feel like it's just overrun by men, feel comfortable. But they're forgetting a nice group. And they have accessibility for people on wheelchairs. I'm not sure if they have accessibility for people with visual impairment. I'm not sure if I've seen that. But we have to broaden our idea of what it means to be inclusive. And that means being open and aware of the issues that transgender and gender diverse people, gender minorities face. And bathrooms are a huge deal, like a huge, huge deal. Because when you talk about just male and female bathrooms, we are skipping a whole spectrum of people, and you're making them choose, am I a man or am I a woman? And it's just this false choice. And so I always say a gender neutral bathroom is great. And if you can't, just change your signs, say female and whoever, if you feel this is right for you, male, if you feel this is right for you. And I have seen signs like that. So around here, I'm just outside of Baltimore. And the R House is like this eatery with tons of pop-up shops. It's just this great place to be and be around people. And they have gender-neutral bathrooms. So I love going there. I love giving money to a place that's thought of and my community. And there's the Eaton Hotel, which is amazing. Not only do they have gender-neutral bathrooms, but the imagery on the walls are not your just traditional imagery. We've got Black, brown, indigenous people, queer, trans people in photos on the walls, and that type of thing. All of a sudden now you feel like people. It doesn't mean that every photo needs to be like that, but you can't have photos of just straight white folks, or you can't have photos of just able-bodied folks. You have to have some diversity, and then people start to feel, oh, this is a place that I feel welcome. And then there's a few other restaurants that I always take note, and these are the places that I frequent often. Like a Busboys and Poets. There's chains of them around in this area. It's a very Black-run restaurant that, again, has gender-neutral bathrooms. And I love the marriage of Black community and affirming gender diverse and transgender people, because that's also very important, sort of breaking down some of those walls. So, yeah, there are places. I haven't quite found the gym and pools. I write letters to people all the time. You need to have this. This is important, especially my local places. I'm like, I come here, I bring my kids here. I want to see more inclusivity.
And I think you bring up an important point. Like I feel the same way when I see places where I think, oh, they thought of me, those types of things. Like that goes a long way, I think.
Absolutely. Especially when you're talking about where people who don't classically feel like they belong. And if you have any identity where people just sort of dismiss you or have treated you inferior, then it really does. Like you said, it matters. It's very important.
How can our listeners learn about you beyond this interview?
I am a primary care physician in the just outside of Baltimore. My practice is in Columbia, and my practice website is www.resolvemd.org. On that website, I talk about the gender affirming care that I offer, primary care that I offer, as well as something that I'm opening up soon, which is neuro affirming care, and that's just dealing with people who might be at higher risk for some of these diagnoses that we've talked about a bit today, and how to support them. So sort of a coaching arm of my affirming care programs. And another big one that I just love, which I think maybe you might have found me on, Doug, is the TransMD. So through my Instagram handle, which is at the TransMD. And that one's a bit of a marriage of my personal experience as well as my professional. I like to talk about issues with marginalized communities. I like to talk about my own transitioning and a lot about gender affirming care. It's fun for me, but I've also gotten so much feedback from people about how they feel seen and heard, and that it inspires them. And that's sort of what pushes me to continue. Again, even though I'm a bit more private person and people wouldn't be able to tell that by the Instagram handle, that's why I do it. So at the TransMD and then www.resolvemd.org are the two best ways.
Now, I could probably ask you questions all day, doctor, but I know your time is very valuable. So I just really appreciate your time today. Thanks so much for giving me an opportunity to get to know you a little bit.
Sure. Thank you. And thank you for your work. I think it's really touching people to listen to the lived experience of autistic people. And again, to feel seen. I've listened to episodes and it's really, really valuable.
Thank you. Thanks so much to Dr. Johnson Weaver for the conversation. To learn about Dr. Johnson Weaver, please check out the link in the podcast description for this episode. We always love hearing from you and would especially love to hear from you relating to this episode on where you find community and how has the connection to your community changed your life and help you to navigate the world. Here at Autism Personal Coach, our clients are the experts, our coaches are the guides. The majority of supports for autistics are not helpful. They try to fix us, not support us. That's why many are confused when we say our clients are the experts of their lived experience. Our clients are the experts for what has worked for them and about the things they need and want in their lives. Our coaches first listen to our clients and then ask thoughtful questions, offer resources, and strategize with our clients so they can get what they need to thrive. Would you want a guide in your life to coach you to help you get the things you desire? If so, then visit autismpersonalcoach.com for more information. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Autism Stories, and if you did, if you could tell a friend, foe, or anyone else you know about it so they could have the same enjoyable and educational experience as you when listening to Autism Stories, be very much appreciated. Until next time, I'm Doug Bletcher of Autism Personal Coach. Talk to you then.